Hi, Nancy Love here for the Planet Peace Project. I made an earlier video about how I think people who do cocaine and speed and heroin and things of that nature should take out the trash and start actually using the brains they were provided by nature or God or whatever you think provided you your brain because they don't need that. And I also said something about, however, I think cops should smoke marijuana if they want to because it makes, I've been told by police officers that using marijuana after hours makes them hate people less, which I think, hating people less is generally a good thing, depending on the people, perhaps. But you don't want people with, badges and guns going around hating everyone now, do you? But I do have this to say about marijuana. I am a proponent of legalization of cannabis. I am because I see that it has some significant medicinal benefits. It's a great anti-seizure medication. It's a good painkiller for physical pain. It's also a profoundly quick-acting antidepressant. It causes a flood of endorphins to show up in your brain, and it helps you feel better really quickly. However, it can cause drowsiness. It can cause confusion. There's indications that it may shrink the prefrontal cortex or the pseudobulbar area of the pre- prefrontal cortex and actually cause brain damage, heavy usage over the course of many years, and you don't want that. And it can, in certain states, in certain countries, cause legal problems. It may cause social problems. You may get drug tested at work and be fired. Maybe members of your family are opposed to its use, or your school forbids it. So there are all kinds of prohibitions against it, and some of those are very legitimate. It can be addictive. There's a big controversy among physiologists that some say it doesn't trigger the addictive pathways. Some people, like me, say that it certainly can. And it's a highly idiopathic substance. It's a wide variety of things. Pot used to be pot, now it's all kinds, 100 different things. There's edibles, there's vaping, there's all kinds of ways that, I'm not particularly familiar with of using it. It's not just like rolling part of a weed into a cigarette and smoking it anymore. But people are still doing plenty of that. Hey, I'm in California. Believe me, people are still doing plenty of that. But the problems are there. And if you think it's ubiquitously good, then you're fooling yourself. You're not using parts of your brain you're supposed to use. Virtually nothing is ubiquitously good or safe to use. You could get intestinal bleeding from taking too much aspirin, but that's been used literally since Paleolithic times. Salicylic acid, otherwise known as aspirin, has been used from cavemen times on. People used to find that chewing on certain leaves of certain plants uh, made them feel better if they were traumatized somehow physiologically. And it turns out, well, there's salicylic acid in a variety of plants. So aspirin is one of the many aspects of the pharmacopoeia that derived from plant life and was never necessarily synthesized in laboratories or generated or invented by human beings. It was always there to be used, as is cannabis. But uh, practically, you can have practically too much of anything. If you ate 80 pounds of potatoes in one day, you could die of some substance in potatoes, but you're unlikely to do that. So you could literally die of potatoes, but that's probably not going to happen. The thing is, there are people. One of them is Dr. Ronit Lev, Roneetlev. She's a fabulously well trained medical professional. She used to be a White House medical chief of staff for the Obama administration. She's now in San Diego working at some hospitals here, and she has this marvelous web podcast called High Truths. And she has some really, really important podcasts, website content, and so forth that I would like you to see. That Ronit Lev is not a proponent of the legalization of marijuana, from what I understand, because she's in the ER when people come in with overdoses of it. And there are some really psychotic effects that people are experiencing when, some people do have an extremely adverse reaction to it. And she, has to deal with people who have literally overdosed on marijuana. I know that a lot of people are not familiar with the fact that that's even possible, but she's way too familiar with it. So it just, hurts to see that happen to people. They're often young and talented and capable, but they're in a lot of pain and they're very afraid at what's happened to them psychotropically because they're trying to figure out what's happened to them with the brain that's been compromised by what's happened to them. Go figure. Now, I suspect that some of, maybe not all, but some of what ER doctors are seeing with these people who appear to have overdosed on marijuana um, are what they're seeing is people who have used tainted MJ. And that's the other main point I would like to make today. I'm going to keep this brief, but I do want to cause people who use marijuana to think really carefully about what they're doing and maybe do it more carefully than they have been in the past because from what I understand for quite a long time, at least 10 to 12 years in California, possibly elsewhere, marijuana is being used as a conduit for other drugs, and that conduit may be, it's intentional by whoever is adding the other drugs to marijuana, but it's probably usually not something that people who are using marijuana are doing to themselves on purpose. One of the main reasons is to make it more addictive. Um, I know that people have been powdering heroin and putting it in marijuana that's sold, according to state laws, legally in official tax-paying collectives for since around 2010 for sure. So you could go into a collective in California. You could have, whatever card you need, or you could be, doing it according to your city's regulations, legally according to the state laws. It's still illegal according to federal laws, but you could be trying to be in compliance with state law and get that marijuana legally, and what you might be getting is heroin included. And the collective owners or the marijuana producers' goal is to make that marijuana significantly more addictive so that you want to go back to that collective and get that same brand because, after all, now they've got you on a treadmill. Uh, Also, fentanyl. I've had some of my friends in local police forces say that they are finding fentanyl in marijuana just all over the place, and it's a real scourge. Fentanyl is one of the most dangerous substances on the planet. A tiny, tiny amount can kill. There's a phrase, one pill can kill. There are tablet forms of that stuff that are often doctored with God only knows what coming up from Mexico and other countries and being produced here in America. But fentanyl is the leading cause of death for people ages 18 to 45. And those people could have had long life expectancies and decades of achievement and love and happiness if they hadn't died of fentanyl. Hello. But people in California are smoking marijuana that's drugged with fentanyl, and it can make them have psychotic experiences. Let's face it, if you are familiar with using a specific substance and you expect a certain result, and it gives you a radically different result that's very extreme, you might think you've gone crazy. There are people who don't know what to make of the experiences they've had using these kinds of substances. And they might end up in emergency rooms. They might end up getting charged with possession of drugs they didn't know they had in their system. So, I mean, my God. So, there are other things I've heard that people are lacing marijuana with cocaine, and that is extremely dangerous from a psychological standpoint, a brain chemistry standpoint, and a lung standpoint, because cocaine is not something that's supposed to be in your lungs. It can really, really cause permanent lung damage, and it's a really terrifying thing that people are doing to themselves or to other people who are unsuspecting. I mentioned the potential for marijuana to be addictive in its own right. When I said it's highly idiopathic, that means that marijuana, as far as I can tell, after decades of looking at it professionally and anecdotally, studying it in books and studying it from hearing what people say about it, um, it may or may not be addictive in the same person according to where they are in their life and according to where they are in their maturation process. For example, a young person might become basically addicted to marijuana in their teens and 20s. But by the time they're in their 30s, they can take it or leave it. They have professional pursuits, they have families, other things have become more important to them, and they may still use it, but they're not using it to their detriment. I've seen that happen. I've seen that kind of evolutionary process that's basically, I think, a result of brain and interpersonal, intrapersonal evolution. By the same token, whether something is going to affect you or not in an addictive fashion might have to do with other polysubstance abuse. If you have become an alcoholic, you might become more susceptible to being addicted to something else like Valium or marijuana, or the list is long. If you, I've talked in other videos, and I think what I've said about what I call the push pull of two complementary chemicals being necessary. If a person does a stimulant, they often need a tranquilizer. If a person does a tranquilizer, possibly because they have some sort of physical source of pain and they're using a painkiller that is basically sedative in nature, then they often need a stimulant because the sedative in nature that is helping them avoid the chronic physical pain is also making them confused and drowsy and incompetent. So they tend to have to do something that's going to stimulate them and make them more capable and functional. But then that very, alertness causes more sensitivity to pain. There's also something called rebound pain. So it's very, very complex. Our brain chemistry is a massively complex and beautiful thing when it works well, and pretty confusing thing when it doesn't. So, marijuana can be addictive, and or it may not be addictive according to where a person is at a specific point in their life and according to their other physiological indices. What the physical context of their use is. But who boy, when you put something like heroin in there, or cocaine, or fentanyl, or these other drugs that marijuana is being laced with now, even when it's sold through collectives in state-supported, state-regulated, tax-paying venues like that, it becomes something that can be massively, massively dangerous and can even kill you. So I'm making this video because a lot of the most intelligent, creative, talented people I've ever known have used a whole heck of a lot of marijuana in their lives, and some of these people have used it intermittently for decades. But I don't want these intelligent, creative, talented people using heroin or fentanyl or cocaine accidentally when they thought all they were doing was using some pot. Anyway, that's what I have to say about this. Thank you for your attention. Or later. I'm just getting started here.